This is A Little Life.
Everyone feels a lack of inspiration at times. Sometimes a bit overwhelmed and feeling like we're going through life on autopilot. Taking that next step is always scary. This show is meant to be a practical guide for anyone listening, no matter what stage of life they're in. Each episode, I speak with a different guest who is building a meaningful life for themselves in different parts of the world. We discuss career choices, personal growth, and doing some good with the time that we have. After all, it's only a little life. My name is Aniket, and I work in the music industry at a company called Outdustry. We specialize in the India and China music markets, and we're working towards building a fair and rewarding ecosystem for creators who give us awesome music to listen to. Before Outdustry, I was working in the fintech space in London for a company called Accenture. In 2018, I decided to take what I had learned and apply it to something that I cared deeply about, which is music. And I ended up moving back home to India and haven't looked back since.
In this episode, we take a glimpse at the music industry. I'm speaking with Faizan Khan, who is the co founder and director of an independent record label called The Movement, which he set up along with India's most prolific hip hop producer, Says on the Beat. If you've heard hip hop music coming from India, chances are that Says is the one who has produced those tracks. Faizan, who is based here in Mumbai, wears so many hats. I like to think of him as artist manager and master deal maker. If you've watched Entourage, the HBO TV series, you can think of him as Ari and E combined. Before we begin, I'd like to point out that the Indian music industry has had a very different evolution from the Western world. And that's mainly because of how closely coupled it has been with the Hindi film industry, Bollywood. In 2020, the Indian music industry has only just begun to emerge from under the shadows of Bollywood, almost like a sleeping giant waking up and rubbing its eyes. There's a vibrant culture with many languages, styles, and genres. This proves to be both an opportunity and a challenge. But at its core, it's about people and it's about culture. Faizan has a master's from the Berklee College of Music in Valencia, which is in Spain. After finishing his degree, he got a job in the US, which actually fell through because of visa issues. On his return to India in 2016, he took up various projects and started his own artist management company. He also consults for Outdustry, which is the company that I'm working with, and that's how I was first introduced to Faizan. A series of events through 2018 and 19 led him to manage Says on the Beat, and based on their shared vision, they co founded the movement to promote upcoming talent from around India. And now, without further ado, I give you Faizan Khan. I hope you enjoy. How are you doing, bro?
All good, man. I'm happy to be on this podcast with you. I think it's an awesome initiative, and massive props to you for actually getting this up and running.
Thank you, thank you. It's super exciting.
For sure, man. I mean, and what's exciting is that with you being a person who has such a wide array of interests, but also this insanely proactive mind that likes to kind of deep dive into topics rather than just skim it from the top level. You doing this is just that much better because I right from the beginning know that the listener is in the right hands, knowing it's your content.
Thank you, so sweet. And I'm so happy to be doing this with you in episode number 2. Let's begin on a high level. And for anyone listening, could you describe the relationship between an artist and an artist manager?
That's a loaded question to start with, right? I mean, because it's one of the most gray kind of roles to have in terms of a profession. I always feel like it's like two roles combined, right? One is the entrepreneurial role, where essentially in on one side of your brain you have to treat the artist as a complete brand in terms of pure business. But I think the more important side is the other side, which is the more interpersonal side. You need to be their friend, you need to be a fantastic listener, you need to be a therapist, you need to know when to give them space, when to kind of point something out and speak to them about it at the same time. A lot of different aspects, right? But at the end of the day, all of that is only possible when your initial vibe and rhythm, I think that's the best way to kind of say it. When you actually figure out a real rhythm as a partner with the artist, that's when you kind of figure out if you guys are even a good fit to be manager and artist and in that relationship in the first place. It's such a interesting point because you can write this down and say it 100 million times, but the way I react in a situation with artist A will still be very different from my reaction with artist B, and that's just because we are in the business of dealing with human beings, I guess.
Something that I've noticed just in the few months that you and I have worked together is you come into a conversation or a negotiation um, with just so much curiosity, which is super inspiring, dude.
Thanks, man. I mean, I'm glad that that comes across. But again, this is a double-edged sword. Just giving, I guess, giving context to all listeners, India and outside as well, because outside you have 10 people handling different roles. You have a tour manager, you have a day-to-day manager, you have a business manager, you have a publicist, you have a label, you have assistants who are completely different. I mean, there are so many people involved in actually taking forward an artist's career abroad. In terms of management, it still hasn't evolved into something where there's a huge team backing these artists. The primary person who's backing these artists is still your one manager. While it helps you grow a hell of a lot as an entrepreneur, honestly, doing so many things, wearing so many multiple hats. But the double edged sword is the fact that in India, the whole role is essentially compressed into that one person rather than multiple managers.
When we are treading new waters, trying new deal structures, just dealing with the fact that technology is changing so much, um, how do you deal with the fear that the decision that you're making or the advice that you're giving to someone might not turn out to be the correct advice or might not yield the um, result that you kind of intended going into that?
Or it might just completely backfire and I'll fall flat on my face. Yeah, honestly, the fact that I don't know everything and the fear of the fact that I don't know everything, but also the acknowledgement of that has, I think, motivated me the most and kept me um, plugged in per se the most in terms of just wanting to learn and understanding things. If I didn't have that and if I felt like I knew everything, I just feel like I'd also lose interest in the overall game, right? Because people are now trying to figure out new ways of actually getting the music out there, but also getting their artist out there and doing interesting things with their artist and their music. These are things that kind of put you in these uncomfortable boxes, but that's where you have the most amount of fun. And
Hmm.
101%, man. I mean, a lot of the decisions that we take, it's such a subjective and gray industry. We're dealing with art and artists. You need to be so insanely comfortable with failure in this business, because what people don't understand is that the more you fail and learn and grow, at least you're getting a hang of what you shouldn't be doing, as long as the graph is steadily moving up. That's all. It's very rare. People think overnight success is a thing that doesn't work. Viral sensations and stuff like that is a 2% game out of like 100 case studies.
We were talking about being an artist manager where you were negotiating deals and you're doing social media and PR and this and that. Now we're here where you are setting up your own label and running that as a business. And with that comes accounts and bookkeeping and investments and payroll eventually and stuff like that. So it's like, A, it's never going to slow down, and B, it's never going to get easier. So where does that drive, where does that determination come from for you to just keep going? And maybe we can even take a step back in time over here to kind of speak about your personal motivations and like talk about what's driven you to be where you are right now.
In an undergrad course, I was lucky enough to be in an institute where they forced you to do internships at the end of every semester, and every semester end it had to be a different internship. Initially, when I studied media and communication in undergrad, and when I
Right?
went in, I thought I want to get into corporate communications and advertising and marketing and PR and stuff like that. And but yeah, I mean, I did five different internships, right from an NGO to CSR to ad agency to a PR company to a corporate communications department in a large scale company. What that did though was it kind of ticked all the boxes for me, saying that, hey, this is what I don't want to do. And I think the whole problem, forget music industry, but the whole issue with our education system or the way the system is structured for young adults coming into the working community is the fact that you're supposed to chase one dream, and that dream is supposed to be your end goal. And that is ridiculous that you know what your end goal and your end dream is at suppose 18, 19, 20, 21, 22.
It's just not possible to know that.
Exactly. We were born in 92. We're 27-year-old guys. And I know for a fact that that's a feeling that's going to come at different stages of our life again and again. You need that growth to come in your growth and love. Both need to come simultaneously and exist in that ecosystem of your work life. Naturally, yeah, everyone has different narratives and the different responsibilities. But the ideal way to kind of approach things, at least I would suggest, is to do multiple things, especially in your early 20s. And just maybe one of those things will kind of give you an indication of where your heart really lies.
I'd like to touch upon something that again we speak about quite often and something that I definitely think about, and that is luck. And not only the importance of luck in our lives, but in a way creating the conditions for us to be lucky. Do you have any thoughts on how to create luck for ourselves?
I mean, that's a complicated one, right? But it's like a Tetris game, I feel like. If you put the right pieces in the right places over a consistent period of time with focus, hopefully you will have a piece that comes through which kind of just fits that overall big narrative or whatever, and just kind of helps you win that one level. But you need to still be putting those pieces in place. For me, for example, I went and I studied in Berklee College of Music, and not everyone was meeting professors and external people from the professional world at that point. But at the same time, a few of us were just constantly going to our program director and being like, "Hey, who can we speak to? How can we move forward, etc., etc." Because of that relationship and structure, I got introduced with people like Steve Stout, who's running an awesome company in the US now. I also ended up meeting Ed because of that recommendation from my program director later. Ed Pito now is the CEO and founder of Outdustry, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I met him as well. But it wasn't something which I wasn't lucky just to be thrown that my way. Naturally, the luck was that, hey, Ed was looking to start something off in India at that point, so that was a massive piece of luck coming my way there. But the pieces that I put together were that I showed my program director that I was being proactive. I was kind of trying to meet more people. I had a decent track record. I had decent knowledge about where I come from in terms of the Indian industry, or at least was trying to accumulate that knowledge. So it's a give and take at the end of the day. The same way I was already running a management company alone for the past through 2018 essentially, and a little bit of 2019 as well. And because of the track record of that company doing decent and good work, is because of that, says was comfortable enough to put his faith on me. Before we started working together, we didn't have a tremendous amount of interactions, but at a very base level, at least he could see that, hey, this guy is doing good, decent work, moving forward, doing interesting stuff which is slightly out of the box. And when he's eventually then spoke to me, then we also connected on naturally a human level, which is also super important. But the fact that Says came to me was a massive piece of luck, yes. Why it came was because of the pieces that I put together 2 years before that in terms of doing decent work with my old management company.
Man, thank you for that. That was such a nice way of putting it across. The Tetris example, like I could see that. I could see the pieces falling in my head. So let's talk about the wider music industry and how it's split up on a very high level, just to kind of give people context as to who are the different stakeholders, how is this industry similar to other industries, and how is it different. So let's start off by just bifurcating the industry into two components. One is the recorded side and one is the live side. When we say music industry, people's perception automatically jumps to the live side of things, which I'm going to admit I don't know much about, because the domain that we work in, at least as Outdustry and I've been exposed to, is the recorded side of things. Any kind of record needs to be sold at the end of the day. We can split it into three components. One is the creative part, that would be writing the songs, recording the songs, finding songwriters. So, everything, all the creative aspects that go into putting together a record. The second component would be to distribute it. And that's where the legal side comes in, that's where the copyright side comes in, that's where the supply chain side comes in. And as we've moved from the 80s to the 90s to now the 21st century, we are talking about a shift from physical to digital. So that supply chain would have moved or transformed from cassettes in the 80s to CDs in the 90s to pirated MP3s into 2000s to now streaming services. But at the end of the day, once the record is made and recorded in a studio, it's packaged, it's distributed to where consumers can consume it. And that leaves the third and final side is the marketing, because how are people going to know about that record? How are people going to know about that artist? So that's how we kind of broadly classify the three components. That is the creative, the distribution, and then the marketing. And that can be conceptualized to any industry when we're talking about products, whether we're talking about sneakers, whether we're talking about sunglasses. Do you feel like I missed anything out?
No, I think you've covered all bases. I think the main challenge nowadays is on the third round, which is the marketing side of things, because most people struggle with that. I feel like they've because of technology and because of tech that they can buy at home for recording and technology through which they're distributing the song, because that those parts are getting covered. People aren't paying too much attention to marketing, and the people who are smart about that in DIY ways, but if you're smart about that, doing certain things right, even without a manager, you can eventually build a momentum to start cracking your songs. People see Pratik Kohar, who's a massive name now and came on Barack Obama's list and stuff like that, but they don't realize that there were so many years of work from both him and different sets of managements going in, so that he could in 2019 and 2020 be the Pratik Kuhar that he is today, being mentioned across different places.
Yeah, there's so many nuances to it, and I feel like people might be exposed to this conundrum that is marketing. Obviously, again, which is a double-sided sword because you have free marketing tools like social media now, which has democratized access to both consumers and fan bases for brands. But that just makes it all the more harder because you need to stand out from that noise. Looking at the numbers of the wider industry itself, and this we're talking about the recorded music industry again. Currently, the entire recorded music industry in India is valued at 1,000 crores, which is peanuts. And let me put that in context. In 2019, the music industry was valued at, now we're talking in terms of US dollars, 150 million US dollars. Let's put that in comparison with the Indian wedding industry. That is valued at $50 billion. And those numbers are insane to think about.
Yeah, agreed, absolutely. I mean, I guess one challenge also is, and we were talking about this the other day as well. One of the massive challenges is that while we look at India as an overall market, it's easy to get lost in the fact that there are so many people, there's so much potential, the market size can easily grow, etc. But the reality is also that the music industry is also so subdivided in India as a whole because of things like languages and people from different backgrounds, etc. That you can't cater one release or one song to the whole country generally as a collective. When you talk about the regional sub music industries, that's where your volume game is at, and because we are not being able to bring them collectively into the fold is why the size is not necessarily getting bigger in terms of the pure transaction, right? The money coming in.
Absolutely. And this is something that you're trying to address, you and Says are trying to address with the movement as well, right?
To a certain degree, yeah, because I guess with the move. So let me just give you context. With the movement is essentially a hip hop collective and a record label that Says and I have started. The idea is that we want to be able to break more artists. As of now in hip hop, we will maybe after a point expand into pop and electronic or whatever else. But as of now, our focus is purely on hip hop through multiple conversations with Says, I think the main concern that has come across to us is that hip hop has got insane amount of fire right now. So artists have blown up. 2019, 2020 is have been good years for that genre specifically. It's building a lot of cultural value as well. The issue is 5 years down the line, we need to have enough artists who are graduating. So I see it as A, B, and C levels, right? At A, you have the Divine Nazi who just kind of started everything off with the Mere Gali Mein, which says you have the MVA, etc. And then you have B and C, and there's not enough movement happening in B and C where artists are growing at rates both was in terms of sound and just in terms of audience knowledge, people knowing that they exist and consuming their content regularly or their music regularly. That's where we need to kind of have some sort of a spark that helps them propel from C to B and eventually to A in the next 5 years. Because if there are not enough people graduating from C to B and then B to A in the next 3 to 5 years, people will start losing interest in that genre and with those artists because you're seeing the same names again and again. You'll again keep seeing Divine, you'll again keep seeing Nazi, again keep seeing Anyway. Uh, this is, of course, from a cultural standpoint, but in terms of the pure monetization standpoint, it's the same thing. A lot of the artists in hip hop, very specifically, come from middle class and lower middle class backgrounds. So while they can dedicate 3, 5, depending on their backgrounds, 3 to 5 years into their careers, after a point, they have different obligations because of which they might not be, even if that person is the next Raja Kumari or the next Divine or the next Says on the Beat as a producer. But if they're not guided in the right way to help break their careers, after a point, because of certain responsibilities or whatever reasons, they might just not be able to continue with that um, artistic growth and an artistic path that they would have hoped they wanted. Um, and that's why it's important to not just break these guys, but also educate them about the fact that, hey, the most important thing apart from making sure that you're earning from your music is to create a culturally valuable brand out of yourself. That's why an Anyway or a Divine are big figures today, because they managed to do that. It's not just about the singles that they're releasing or the albums that they're releasing, which are of course the main drivers that propel an artist, but the fact that they can graduate to becoming cultural figures and cultural brands is when they can not just earn from the music that they're taking out, but essentially start creating more assets for themselves, which can keep earning money without them having to do anything over a long period of time.
Now, the last 5 to 7 minutes I'd like to spend just to hopefully outline a path for someone to get into this industry. And the two main questions people might have, the two main questions I at least had, was A, what can I bring to the table? Maybe a way to visualize this is, what kind of people would you be looking to hire into the movement? And this can be as broad or as detailed as you want to go.
I've actually thought about this before as well, and the simple way to kind of answer that is that we are not. I'm not looking to hire somebody with very specific skill sets. You can be an accountant, you can be an engineer, you can be anyone under the sun. Regardless of what your background is, it might add a lot of value naturally. If you're coming from a different industry like accounts or finance, in music, that's why it's so much more important to be passionate and in love with this industry. You can be anyone, but as long as you have certain personality traits, you're hungry, you're coming in with an open mind, wanting to learn like crazy, uh, wanting to just grind it out, and are flexible. It's the same with me, right? I could have easily had no experience, and as long as I had the personality traits or the willfulness of being patient, wanting to learn, having no ego. If I had those elements intact, even with zero knowledge of IP and all the other factors which you can eventually learn as you move forward, it's fine. Even if you came without your experience with Accenture or whatever else, but you still have, dude, that's naturally adding so much more value, your experience, because you're looking at things in such unique patterns and ways that even I wouldn't be looking at certain things in that sense. At the end of the day, it's a human to human business because you're dealing with an artist. That's it.
For sure. I could not agree more. And that leads me to the second question. Okay, I love music. I'm interested in the music industry. I have accepted that I will bring value to it. Can I get paid for it? And that is a huge roadblock, not only for people in their own personal kind of mindsets of career growth, but also in terms of um, social stigmas. We live in India. When I
Mm-hmm.
first told my parents that I want to go into the music industry and leave my consultant job in London, it was like people thought I was fucking crazy. And
Yeah.
I accept that. And I still feel like what I did in terms of moving back was naive in some senses. But how do you conceptualize just getting paid in this industry?
So the sad truth is, and why we were harping on about the fact that you need to love this job, is the sad truth is that there is going to be a dearth of money in this industry until you kind of get some momentum going behind you, both as a business professional and as an artist. On both sides of the table, you need to be very realistic.
This kind of meaningful life the way that we're bringing it back to the fact that we're so young, 27, 28. Another Tetris kind of meta example to give is we speak about the music industry now, but even that is one component in the larger picture that is like our lives that we're building.
Yeah, I mean, I read this somewhere, I'm forgetting where, but I think it made so much sense to me when I read it. It's not about immediate gratification. The fight here and the game here is to be able to avoid all the noise and get through this period of 5, 10 years or whatever, because we are fighting for the right and for the privilege to be able to do what we love for the next 70 years. And in that scale, this 5, 10 years won't matter at all. It's just a phase we need to essentially weather out, right?
Yep, could not have put that better myself. Um, this has been so insightful. Again, one of our amazing conversations. I'm so happy we could capture it this way. Um, I think it's a good point to kind of close off the conversation as well. Is there anything that you would like to touch upon that we might have missed out?
Not really. I think this was, I mean, always a pleasure talking to you, man. But I mean, it's funny because through the conversation, we're trying to talk about the music industry and kind of just scratching its surface, but it is so complicated because technically we went through a little bit of management, a little bit of recorded side, a little bit of how you can maybe come into the business more so from like the people who have ambitions of working in the music industry. But I just feel like for people who are listening and want to really deep dive, please understand that all these topics have insanely more information that you need to know about.
Do you have any resources for learning that you'd like to share if anyone wants to kind of dive deeper into the music industry?
For me, where I've gotten most inspiration and learned the most from, honestly, is by watching a ton of videos about these few people. So check out Scooter Braun for sure. What an insane story about he's the man. He manages Justin Bieber, by the way, Ariana Grande, and a whole host of really big pop stars. But he started off with a 13, 14-year-old Justin Bieber, and he cracked his career in the YouTube movement, which was just starting at that point. And what I love personally is not just the interpersonal stories that he has, but also how he's evolved into now this massive business dynamo where it's not just about management anymore, but he's not just running his own company which does artist management, but he's graduated to producing television shows, to essentially buying to holding stake in companies like and investing in companies like Uber, and a ton of other things. So that growth pattern is something which you can see right from the get-go, where he was tentatively finding his feet as a manager to actually becoming who he is today. Similarly, look at the story of another artist manager called Shalizi. He manages Marshmello and Roddy Rich as well. Insane story in terms of how he's blown up and the awesome innovative stuff that he's been doing. His whole campaign with Marshmello and the video game Fortnite is requires a whole other podcast episode. So look at that as an example of innovatively monetizing for your artists and what they've been doing. Again, he's also now graduating to building out his sub mini empire. What mini? I mean, it's a pretty big empire. He's kind of growing out now. If I'm not wrong, Scooter Braun's also an investor in his new company as well. Check out Dre London, who manages Post Malone, and the kind of stuff they've done there, which is not just music, but or more from a cultural brand standpoint, because they've grown Post into this awesome entity, which is not just centered around music, but also because of Post's personality. There's so many different aspects. They've started liquor brands and 100 other things. Yeah, I think these are the people I kind of follow a lot and take inspiration from. There are so many people in India who are doing amazing work as well. Massive shout outs to fellow artist managers. Chaitanya is killing it with Gully Gang. Massive shout out to Ayushman, who has people like Arman on the roster, and he's doing some awesome innovative work as well. I guess research a ton, figure out people who inspire you, because that's the niche with it. As soon as you find people who intrigue you and interest you, that's the niche within the music industry maybe that you would want to follow. But yeah, so sorry, that's more so from the management front and the label front, in terms of people who are doing really interesting work with artists and building culture as a whole.
Thank you so much for taking this amazing time to have this incredible conversation. I'd like to finish up by requesting you to share, for anyone listening, who you feel is an underrated Indian artist that people should know more about and people should check out.
So let me just quickly throw off some names of independent artists who I think are awesome. I think let's cover hip hop first. So I think Avriti, you need to look out for those guys. They're going to kill it. They're still 21 years old. They're young, but they have some awesome lyric. The pen game is just insanely strong. Then of course, we've got people like Siege who are in the Bombay scene. We've got the more established guys around, but need a lot more spotlighting, like Rebel. Altaf, of course, is amazing. He's been killing it for a while.
Okay. So, I mean, that's such a cool list of upcoming artists. What about artists that you're currently working with? Any shout outs that you want to give?
Oh, there are so many of them, man. But so Sez and I have tracks through the movement, of course. We have a bunch of tracks in the pipeline which are going to be coming out soon. I think the first one you're going to be seeing is with Siri. We've got two tracks lined up with her, which are fire. There's stuff planned with Altaf. There's stuff with Spitfire from Inking. There's stuff with, we've got tracks with Full Power, who are an awesome duo. Encore from Bombay. Uh, we've got one track which also features Zayden on the vocals as well. So that's going to be an exciting one as well. And of course, with then we have stuff with the OGs and says with Seedhe Maut, Lit Hapu. Um, we have some stuff brewing with Ikka as well. So yeah, a lot in the pipeline, and I'm just excited for this year. Honestly, hopefully we can get to shooting music videos soon after this quarantine. But as soon as that's kind of opening up in terms of us going out and shooting, we'll be able to wrap everything up and put it out there for the world.
Fantastic, man. I can't wait. Bro, this has been amazing. Thank you so, so much.
It was
Um,
awesome, man. Thanks for having me. This was great fun. And always with you, it's not just fun, but always a very stimulating conversation. So I'm glad we could do this for sure.
there you go. That was my conversation with Faizan. And for me, there were three main takeaways from this conversation. First, to inculcate that curious learner's mindset. And you might find this scary at the start, depending on who you are. Like, damn, there's so much to learn. Where do I start? But there are so many ways to learn things. Just find someone whom you think is doing something interesting. Watch YouTube videos about them, or interviews, or even listen to podcasts like this. And if books are your thing, go for it. Start wide. Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, Scooter Braun, and then you can zero in on topics based on what you discover about your own interests. Next, to consistently lay down our Tetris pieces to create the conditions for luck in our lives. This one is huge, trust me. And finally, Faizan's passion, which just cut through the words. The game is to avoid all the noise because we are fighting for the right and the privilege to do what we love for the next 70 years. You can follow the movement on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at We the Movement, spelled WETHEMVMNT, to stay up to date with all the releases. And I'd strongly encourage you to check out Sez and his catalog. He is at Sez on the Beat on all social media platforms and streaming services. And I'll also include links to the artists that Faizan mentioned in the show notes. If you'd like to know more about the music industry, you can find Faizan on Instagram at Faizan V Khan, or you can reach out to me too. And I will be back in 2 weeks with a new guest on the new episode of A Little Life. Thank you for listening.